Let's be brutally honest. The moment she starts catching feelings is the exact moment most men lose control of the situation. Not because she changed, but because you did. And that truth is uncomfortable, because it means the thing you wanted most becomes the thing you unknowingly sabotage. When a woman's emotions begin to attach, her awareness sharpens. She feels shifts before you speak them. She notices changes in your tone, your timing, your certainty. Attraction doesn't fade because she suddenly gets bored. It fades because the man she felt drawn to starts abandoning himself. He becomes reactive. He starts chasing reassurance instead of embodying stability, and she feels it immediately. At the beginning, you were grounded. You didn't need outcomes. You enjoyed her presence without trying to secure it. That calm confidence was the signal that told her, without words, this man is safe, centered, and strong. But once you sense her leaning in, once you feel her emotional gravity pulling closer, fear creeps in. The fear of losing her, and fear changes behavior. You start explaining yourself when no explanation is required. You reply faster, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of silence. You overgive attention hoping it will lock her in. You stop leading and start adapting, and while it feels like effort, what she feels is pressure. Emotional pressure doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers through energy, through tension, through need. Female psychology doesn't respond to words the way men think it does. It responds to consistency between who you are and how you act under emotional weight. When her feelings rise, she subconsciously looks to see if you remain the same man, or if her interest destabilizes you. This is not a test she designs consciously, it's instinctive. Attraction is wired to stability. Most men believe affection should be met with more affection. But what actually maintains desire is grounded presence. When you abandon your purpose, your routines, your inner direction just to orbit her emotions, something subtle breaks. She didn't fall for availability. She fell for direction. She didn't connect to your constant attention. She connected to your self-respect. When you start monitoring her mood, her texts, her reactions, you shift from leader to follower. And the cruel irony is that the more you try to hold on to the connection, the more it begins to slip. Not because she's cruel, not because she's playing games, but because attraction cannot survive where anxiety lives. Here's the truth. Most men are never told. When a woman starts catching feelings, your job is not to increase effort. Your job is to increase steadiness, to stay rooted in who you were before emotions entered the room, to let her feelings rise without trying to manage them. Emotional maturity is not control, it's containment. She wants to feel that her emotions can exist without overwhelming you, that she can lean in without you collapsing forward, that you don't need her feelings to feel complete. When you stay centered, her attraction deepens because it feels safe to deepen. When you chase, her nervous system pulls back. This is where men ruin it. They confuse interest with obligation. They confuse closeness with possession. And they confuse love with fear. The moment you need her to feel okay, you stop being the man she felt drawn to. And the tragedy is, most men never realize it's happening until she starts emotionally stepping back. Not because she lost feelings, but because she felt you lose yourself. Here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. When her feelings grow, she doesn't want you to tighten your grip. She wants to feel your spine. And most men misunderstand that completely. A woman catching feelings is not an invitation for you to merge identities. It's an invitation for you to remain solid while she explores closeness. But what most men do instead is unconsciously ask her to carry their emotional security. They lean. They seek confirmation. They look for signs that she's not going anywhere. And the moment she feels responsible for your emotional balance, attraction begins to fracture. You see, female psychology is deeply attuned to emotional load. She can sense when she's being enjoyed versus when she's being relied upon. Enjoyment feels light, reliance feels heavy, and nothing kills desire faster than feeling like your emotions are now someone else's responsibility. This is why men start over-communicating when she gets closer. They explain intentions, they clarify feelings, they ask where things are going, not because the conversation is wrong, but because the timing is driven by fear, not confidence. When a man speaks from fear, his words carry tension, and tension signals instability. She doesn't pull away because she hates closeness. She pulls away because closeness suddenly feels unsafe. Not unsafe in a dramatic sense, but unsafe in a nervous system sense. Her body reads your anxiety before her mind forms a story. And her body always leads. Most men believe attraction grows through certainty, but attraction actually grows through emotional safety combined with autonomy. When you start needing guarantees, you remove both. You make her feelings the anchor of your identity, and that's not what she signed up for. Think back to who you were when she first leaned in. You weren't trying to secure anything. You weren't measuring her interest. You were living your life and inviting her into it. That invitation felt powerful because it came from abundance, not fear. But once her emotions surfaced, many men flip the dynamic. They start rearranging their world around her availability. They pause their goals, they wait, they hover. And hovering feels suffocating, even when it's silent. Another mistake men make at this stage is emotional overexposure. They reveal too much, too fast, not because it's authentic, but because they want to bond quickly. They mistake vulnerability for emotional dumping. True vulnerability is grounded and intentional. Emotional dumping is anxious and uncontained. She can feel the difference instantly. When she starts catching feelings, she is watching how you hold yourself under emotional pressure. Are you calm or are you spiraling? Are you still decisive or are you now seeking approval? Do you lead conversations or do you wait for emotional cues? These aren't conscious checklists. They're energetic impressions. And here's the hardest truth. You cannot negotiate attraction. You cannot logic your way into safety. You cannot reassure her nervous system with words when your behavior says otherwise. The moment you try to convince her instead of embodying confidence, you lose polarity. Polarity is what keeps desire alive. It's the tension between presence and space, between strength and softness. When you collapse that tension by becoming emotionally dependent, attraction has nowhere to breathe. The men who don't ruin it understand one thing deeply. Her feelings are not something to manage. They are something to allow. When you don't react to her emotions with fear, she relaxes. When you don't chase certainty, she leans in naturally. When you don't abandon your direction, she trusts the connection. And when she trusts the connection, her feelings don't scare her. They deepen. Now let's talk about the moment everything silently shifts, the moment most men don't even realize they've crossed a line. It happens when you start performing instead of being. When she begins to feel more, you may feel an unspoken pressure to maintain her interest. So you try harder. You become funnier, more agreeable, more available. You start shaping yourself around what you think she wants. And while this looks like effort, what it actually signals is insecurity. You're no longer expressing who you are, you're auditioning for approval. Female psychology is remarkably sensitive to authenticity under stress. She can feel when your energy changes from grounded to performative. And performance creates distance because it removes truth. She didn't connect with a character, she connected with a man who was comfortable being himself without needing to impress. Another quiet way men ruin things is by losing emotional containment. When she shares feelings, fears, or vulnerabilities, your response matters more than your words. If you rush to fix, reassure, or intensify, you tell her that emotions overwhelm you. If you stay present without urgency, you tell her emotions are welcome here. Most men think being supportive means being reactive. But true support is calm presence. It's listening without collapsing. It's holding space without absorbing emotional chaos. When you panic at her emotions, she feels unsafe expressing them. And when she feels unsafe expressing them, she starts pulling back internally, even if she stays physically present. Attraction grows where emotions are held, not handled. There's also the mistake of accelerated intimacy. Men feel her leaning in and assume it's time to push forward faster. More time together, more communication, more exclusivity, but desire doesn't respond to acceleration, it responds to rhythm. When you speed things up to soothe your anxiety, you disrupt the natural pace that allowed attraction to grow in the first place. Here's something few men are ever taught. When a woman starts catching feelings, she is subconsciously checking whether closeness leads to pressure or freedom. If closeness feels like obligation, she retreats. If closeness feels like expansion, she stays. You create expansion by staying rooted in your life, by not canceling your priorities for her emotions, by allowing space without withdrawing affection. Space isn't distance. Space is trust. And trust is what allows desire to mature instead of burnout. Many men also begin seeking emotional validation. They look for compliments, reassurance, confirmation that she feels the same. And while occasional reassurance is human, constant validation seeking drains polarity. It puts her in the position of emotional caretaker. An attraction cannot survive where caretaking replaces curiosity. When she feels like she has to stabilize you, she stops leaning into her own feelings. She becomes guarded, not because she wants to, but because her nervous system demands balance. This is why the strongest men feel relaxed when a woman's feelings deepen. They don't see it as something to secure or protect. They see it as something to honor by staying exactly who they are. They don't change their tone. They don't change their pace. They don't change their self-respect. They understand that emotional depth doesn't require emotional dependence, that love doesn't need urgency. That attraction thrives when both people feel free, not fused. If you can stay steady when she opens emotionally, you become rare, because most men in that exact moment start reaching instead of standing, and she feels the difference immediately. She doesn't need you to prove anything. She needs you to remain grounded, and when you do, her feelings don't scare her away. They draw her closer. There's a final internal shift that quietly destroys attraction, and it's one of the most invisible ones. It's when you start living in the future instead of the present. When she begins catching feelings, many men mentally fast forward. They imagine outcomes, labels, security, loss, and once your mind lives ahead of the moment, your presence disappears from it. She feels that absence even when you're sitting right next to her. Presence is the currency of attraction, not plans, not promises, not pressure. When you stop experiencing her and start managing the connection, your energy changes. Conversations lose depth. Touch loses intention. Silence feels heavy instead of comfortable, and she doesn't know why, but something feels off. Another way men sabotage themselves is by subtly changing boundaries. You start saying yes when you mean no. You stay available when you need rest. You suppress your truth to avoid rocking the emotional boat. And every time you do this, you teach her that your center is negotiable. Female psychology responds to clear edges, not harshness, not control, but clarity. When your boundaries blur, polarity fades. She doesn't feel anchored. She feels like she's standing on shifting ground. And no one relaxes into attraction on unstable ground. Most men believe love requires sacrifice of self, but healthy attraction requires integration of self. When you erase your needs to accommodate her emotions, you disappear as a grounded presence. She didn't fall for someone who dissolves. She fell for someone who stands. There's also the mistake of emotional scoreboard keeping. You start tracking effort. Who texts more? Who cares more? Who initiates? This internal accounting poisons connection, because the moment you start measuring, you stop giving freely, and she feels the shift from generosity to expectation. Expectation creates tension. Tension creates distance. When her feelings grow, she wants to feel chosen, not managed, desired, not monitored, free, not responsible. If she senses that her emotions are now being watched, analyzed, or leveraged, she instinctively retreats inward, not out of cruelty, but self-preservation. Here's a truth that changes everything. Attraction deepens when you trust yourself more than you try to secure her. When you value your own emotional stability above the outcome of the connection. When you know you'll be okay, whether she stays or goes. That inner security is what allows her to relax into her feelings. Because she's not carrying you, she's meeting you. Men who don't ruin this stage understand restraint, not emotional coldness, emotional discipline. They allow feelings to exist without inflating them. They enjoy closeness without clutching it. They communicate interest without surrendering direction. And that balance is rare. When you stay present, boundaried, and self-led, her attraction doesn't fade with familiarity. It matures. It softens without losing intensity. It grows roots instead of burning fast and disappearing. Most men think the danger is doing too little, but the real danger is doing too much from the wrong place. When your actions are driven by fear of loss, they weaken attraction. When they're driven by grounded desire, they strengthen it. The difference is subtle, but she feels it instantly. And when she feels safe with her feelings around you, she doesn't pull away. She settles in. Let's close this with the truth that separates men who repeat the same pattern from men who finally break it. When she starts catching feelings, the connection doesn't need more effort. It needs more integrity. Integrity is emotional alignment. It's when your actions match your inner state. When your words aren't trying to create security, but simply expressing presence. When you're not attempting to lock her in, but inviting her to stay because you are stable, whole, and self-directed. Most men lose attraction because they try to own what can only be offered freely. Feelings cannot be captured. They can only be welcomed. And the moment you try to secure them, they resist. When a woman's emotions deepen, she is not asking you to change. She is watching to see if you won't. If you can hold your frame when intimacy increases. If you can stay grounded when vulnerability enters the space. If you can enjoy closeness without losing independence. This is why emotional leadership matters more than emotional expression. Anyone can say the right words. Few men can remain steady when emotions intensify. And steadiness is what allows trust to transform attraction into something lasting. You don't need to pull away to keep her interested. You don't need to chase to keep her close. You don't need to suppress care to appear strong. Strength is calm. Strength is consistency. Strength is knowing that your value does not rise or fall based on her emotional temperature. When you trust yourself, you don't need reassurance. When you respect yourself, you don't abandon your boundaries. When you are aligned with your purpose, you don't orbit someone else's feelings. And when you live this way, her attraction isn't something you manage. It's something that grows naturally. The men who succeed here don't do anything dramatic. They don't play games. They don't manipulate distance. They simply remain rooted. They stay curious without becoming anxious. They stay open without becoming dependent. They stay present without losing direction. That balance creates emotional safety. And emotional safety is where real connection lives. So here's the question I want you to sit with and answer honestly in the comments. When she starts catching feelings, do you stay grounded in who you are, or do you start reaching for certainty? If this truth hits somewhere personal, let me know your answer below. Like this video if it challenged the way you've been approaching connection. Subscribe if you're ready to stop repeating the same patterns. And share this with a friend who needs to hear it, even if he doesn't know it yet.